I knew that if we were going to tell the story of the origin of dinosaurs, we had to come here.
We can look at his jaws and imagine the great gulps of flesh it could have taken from the thigh of Desmatasuchus, whatever.
What's striking about the fossils we find here is the incredible low diversity of species.
I thought to myself, something's here.
And Bob picked up a little dentary with teeth in it. He looked at it and his mouth fell open and he said, "You're right, Jack. This is a baby dinosaur."
The Dinosaurs is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the financial support of viewers like you.
Only a handful of bones belonging to the earliest dinosaurs have ever been found, and they came from here, a desolate valley in northwestern Argentina in the foothills of the Andes Mountains. If more bones existed, this would be the place to look, where wind and rain have exposed Triassic rocks that are 230 million years old. In 1988, Paul Sereno, a young paleontologist from the University of Chicago, came here along with his Argentine colleagues.
I'm sitting at the top of the Ischigualasto Formation. In these pale badlands that stretch behind me, we find the first remains of dinosaurs. In the slightly younger red rocks that tower behind me, we find the beginnings of the great diversity of dinosaurs that were later to take over the entire surface of the Earth.
Over 30 years ago, in 1959, a few shards of bone had been scraped out of the Earth, but since then, no scientist had found anything of significance. And yet, Paul Sereno had a hunch.
I knew that if we were going to tell the story of the origin of dinosaurs, we had to come here. But after 3 weeks of hard work, we hadn't found the specimen which would do the job.
Then one day we went to this little area of badlands that we hadn't been to yet. It had been kind of hidden behind the other areas.
And so I came down here with a group, but I was here first, and I came down, put my backpack on a ledge there, walked up this gully, about 25 feet, 30 feet. The first fossil I found was right on this mound here. And I naturally, not wanting to be disappointed, didn't think that I wanted to think it was everything but an Ararosaurus skeleton, but as it turned out, I saw what looked like to be neck bones, and I followed one to the next, and there was the back of the skull. And it couldn't be anything but a primitive dinosaur, and I was overwhelmed. I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. I sort of would look somewhere else, and then look back down at it. As people gathered around, the crew gathered around, I walked away because I couldn't look at it anymore, and I came back, and there was just a tide of emotion. I wept.
Paul and I just gave each other a big bear hug, and we were jumping up and down and yelling, and everybody else came over by then. And it was extremely exciting. This is what we wanted.
Sereno had found an almost complete skeleton, including the skull, of the earliest known dinosaur, called Herrerasaurus.
This is the wonderful skull of Herrerasaurus that we found back in the valley there. The nose is at this end. The first thing that's easy to see with a skull like this is that Herrerasaurus was a carnivore. It was a flesh-eating animal with these long, recurved teeth for slicing through flesh. But it's not just any kind of carnivore. It's a specialized kind of carnivore. And one of the best evidences for that is this unusual and interesting sliding mechanism that we find in the lower jaw. This hinge in the middle of the lower jaw allowed the front part of the lower jaw, which had the teeth, to flex around a struggling prey.
But Herrerasaurus faced some stiff competition in the Triassic Age.
The most important thing that we've learned from our finds of Herrerasaurus is that we have gained, finally, the first complete picture of what an early dinosaur looked like. And this picture will help us understand the subsequent diversity and radiation of dinosaurs that occurred over the next 150 million years.
The rocks of the Triassic period date back 250 million years. The dinosaurs found buried in those rocks were newcomers to the evolutionary sweepstakes, fighting for survival with older and more established creatures who were well armed and superbly adapted to their environment. They shared their world with other reptiles and with primitive mammals. In the oceans, dolphin-like fish lizards feasted on other sea organisms and each other. Traces of this Triassic world can be found here, hidden in the rocks of the petrified forest in Arizona.
This region is called Lizard Wash, and you can sort of see why.
Paleontologist Rob Long.
The sandstone has been eroded, it's been weathered into these great creations. You can see goblins here, you can see dragons, but it was very different 220 million years ago.
Long imagines the Triassic landscape like this: lush, wet areas, lakes and swamps, vast forests with myriad varieties of trees, some 120 to 150 feet high, and dominated by reptiles, including those who were doomed to extinction as dinosaurs gradually took over. Such a one was a harmless plant eater, Desmatasuchus.
This is Desmatasuchus. Probably weighed about 1,000 pounds. He was one of the largest of the herbivores or plant eaters in the petrified forest. You can see he's rather peculiar looking. He has this funny looking snout, like a pig snout, with reason. He was a grubber. He'd stick his snout in the ooze, the mud, and pull out roots, bulbs, whatever. And you can see his teeth along here, peg-like, typical of a plant eater. But the most remarkable thing about this creature is its armor. You can see you get a series of great horns over the neck, and they develop into these almost Texas longhorn type spikes over the shoulders. Not only was the neck completely covered with armor, but all along the back you've got these rectangular plates, you've got these knobby, sort of horny plates, continuing all the way down to the tip of the tail. The underside of the animal was covered with plates. Even the limb elements were all covered with this armor. And there was a very good reason why this animal was so protected. This is Postasuchus, another thegodont. But unlike Desmatosukis, you can see it has these great recurved daggers serrated on the edges, sort of like Tyrannosaurus teeth for cutting through flesh. But you have to remember, this animal is 3 times as old as Tyrannosaurus rex. You can look at its jaws and imagine the great gulps of flesh it could have taken from the thigh of Desmatosukis, whatever. Here we have 16 feet of animal. This is a mid-sized Postosuchus, probably weighed about 600 or 700 pounds, much larger than any of the meat-eating dinosaurs of its time. You can see a very long tail, sort of counterbalancing this big, heavy, deep head. Postosuchus has done certain things. He's tried to be a dinosaur, but he hasn't been able to be one. The hind legs are very long. The forelimbs are very small. The hind legs have become directly underneath the body, very vertical, almost bird-like posture. He was an early experiment that failed.
Why did Postosuchus in his life fail? Doctors Neil Shubin of the University of Pennsylvania and Hans Sues of the Smithsonian Institution have come here to the Smithsonian's laboratories to find out how the first dinosaurs managed to beat out their competition. It's a puzzle. How could the relatively small upstarts of the Triassic period shoulder aside creatures as formidable as Postosuchus? A block of stone in the institution's research area contains a butcher's shop of shoulders, shanks, thigh bones, and jaws, most of them belonging to a diminutive early meat-eating dinosaur called Coelophysis.
Probably the rest of these animals under there still.
This is one of the smaller specimens in the block?
Yes, definitely. They get considerably larger than that.
So how many specimens are in this big block here?
Oh, a dozen or so.